and I have this arrangement in our house. We don't say yes to an appointment, whether preaching or singing or any other ministry, until we consult with the other. So when I said yes to the elders, it was before I consulted with my wife. And then when I went there, she said, "Oh my goodness, Brian, do you realize we already have an appointment on the 17th? So this afternoon we are ministering at London Life Church. So as we pray, please remember us as always as we travel there." But I accepted the appointment. And I accepted the appointment because I'm passionate about mental health. We did a program, like I said, for Adventist Radio London called Crazy About Mental Health, because I am literally crazy about mental health. And I truly and sincerely believe that God cares about your mental well-being. Okay, He absolutely cares about your mental well-being. And this is why we are here. And I'm going to be speaking, like I said, on the story of Naaman. And we know traditionally, in this story, when people read the story of Naaman, the leprosy and lepers are associated with sin. But I'm going to use it, like I say, differently, just to make an application as how we can tackle and deal with mental health. And right on the outset, I'd just like you guys to get a message. So if you will repeat after me, so that we get this clear and off the table. Repeat after me. Having a mental illness is not a punishment for sin. Again.
Having a mental illness is not a punishment for sin.
And again.
Having a mental illness is not a punishment for sin.
Thank you. Let's proceed. 2 Kings chapter 5. I'm going to work through the verses. I'm conscious that it's 25 to 1, but I'll preach the message I've been given to preach. Okay. In verse 1 of that chapter, we come across Naaman, who was commander of the army of the king of Syria. And the king of Syria, we learn his name was Ben-Hadad. Okay, and Naaman was considered to be a great man by his king. He was highly respected because through Naaman, God had given victory to Aram, which was also Syria. Naaman was a man of courage. But at the end of that verse, it says, but he was a leper. Okay. Now, one of the lessons that I learned when I read this chapter was that leprosy affected anyone, including of any nationality. Okay, Naaman was a Syrian, but he also was affected by leprosy. And because it says that he was an Aramean or a Syrian, but he was a leper. And truth be told, mental health or mental illness also affects anyone of any nationality. Mental illness is not a respecter of race or creed or of nation. Anyone can come down with it. Anybody can require treatment. Anyone can come down with mental illness. Now, in my profession, like I said, I work with clients. I've worked with people of many nationalities. And the symptoms, whether it's somebody from Greek, from Ukraine, or from here, the symptoms and manifestations are the same. So anybody can be affected by mental illness. If you remember in the early days of COVID, right, we had the Chinese strain, and then everyone, it's a disease from China, and then it came here. Then we had the South African strain, and I was highly vexed when they were in the news, they were talking about the South African strain. I was like, won't they just shut up about the South African strain or the South African variant? And then suddenly we had a British variant. Then they stopped nationalizing COVID, okay? Now it just became COVID-19, not the South African, the Chinese, or whatever variant. I just want to assure you, when it comes to mental illness, there is no variant. There's mental illness, okay? And people are affected. Now, Naaman was the commander of the army of the king of Syria. He was a social status. He was riding with the top notch of society. And leprosy was not a respecter of social status. Okay. Similarly, mental illness is not a respecter of social status. In my job, I've worked with people who are struggling on the breadline, and I've gone into homes where I voluntarily take my shoes off because that house is so posh. Okay. And I've seen people from this high to this high struggle with mental illness. Mental illness is not a respecter of social status. Now, I haven't quite worked through the Netflix series, because I found out that obviously Prince Harry has shared on Netflix on his struggles with mental health. I'm about maybe halfway through the first episode, because I don't like this waiting. I'm very rubbish at. I like to have the entire series, then just binge and watch it in one go. So please no spoiler alerts. But the point that I'm trying to make is that even somebody in the royal family can be affected by mental illness, okay? Mental illness is not a respecter of persons. Mental illness is not a sign of weakness either, okay? Like I said, I'm going to compare leprosy to mental illness. If you look at Naaman, he was a valiant soldier. He was the commander of the army of the king of Aram. You did not get to be the commander of a heathen army unless you could fight in battle, unless you were strong. The fact that Naaman was able to get into the role meant that he was strong, he was determined, but so he wasn't afraid, okay? So similarly, mental illness is not a sign of weakness, okay? It is absolutely not a sign of weakness. Anyone can have it, whether brave or weak, okay? Leprosy affected even those that God has used mightily in the past, okay? If you read this chapter, you'll find that Naaman was a great man in the sight of his master, and he was highly regarded because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. So God used a heathen commander, Naaman, to defeat Israel, to teach them a lesson. And even though God had used that man still got leprosy. If you read, I think it's in Numbers 12, Miriam got leprosy as well, after God had used her mightily. So, and similarly, mental illness can affect those even God has used mightily. If you don't believe me, ask Elijah. After the whole Mount Carmel incident and King Jezebel, he ran and hid in a cave, depressed and wanting to end his life. Okay, a prophet that had killed how many prophets of Baal single-handed? Okay, after that high and mighty experience, he crushed low. So even if after God has used you mightily, you can still succumb to mental illness. One of the things that I learned and marveled on, and I was sharing with Ruth, when I was looking at verse 1, they listed Naaman's qualities, right? He's a great man, considered a great man by his king. He's highly respected. Lord had given victory, but they say, but he was a leper. Truth be told, one misdeed can undo all the good you've ever done. One imperfect characteristic, a flaw in your character, can undo everything that you've ever done. You can do, if I do a ton of good, and then I'm caught, for example, this will never happen by the grace of God, in adultery. What would I become? Oh, Brian the adulterer. Then everything that I ever did is forgotten. Naaman today, if I ask you, if I say there was Naaman the leper, okay, did Naaman remain a leper? No, he was cured, but we still call him Naaman the... That's because as human beings, we tend to hang on to the negative things about people. And you know, the fear that some mental health, that people struggle with mental health have is that if they come out into the open, they're going to be labeled and they're going to be stigmatized. Naaman was stigmatized because mental illness was almost like a social punishment. You couldn't go to church, you couldn't hang out with your family, you were kicked out into the curb. And basically, you're persona non grata. You didn't exist anymore. And one of the things with people that I've worked with that experience mental illness, they're afraid to tell their family because people might just ostracize them now. Or you have a mental illness. And it's almost like people are afraid that they can catch mental illness. Now, if I would say to you, right, mental illness is not like a football that you can kick and pass on to somebody, okay? If mental illness was a football, and Sister Beatrice, I offered to pass it to you, would you want to catch it? No, okay? Mental illness is not a football. You can't catch it. You could catch leprosy, but you cannot catch mental illness. So if somebody in our church is struggling with depression, anxiety, psychosis, or whatever aspect of mental illness, you can't catch it. Okay, so it's okay for you to support them, and it's okay for you to accept them for who they are. And I'll just invite the church is that because I know that if truth be told, right, some people in the church don't know how do you handle yourself, how do you behave around people who have mental illness. Well, how do you behave around people who have a sore knee? Yeah. How do you behave around people who struggle to walk or who have a tummy ache? How do you behave around people who are struggling with cancer? The same way you behave around those people, you behave around the people with mental illness. Is that okay? Because illness is an illness. You know, it's been said that the church is like a hospital. It's all 6 people. And when you think of the church being a hospital, we imagine physical hospital. But may I submit to you that the church is not a general hospital. The church is a psychiatric hospital, because the problem of sin exists in the mind, right? In the brain. Okay. Can I share a little testimony? I sort of flipped my sermon a bit. I was going to start with this. When I was growing up, right? When I was growing up, right, my dad was going through his own stuff, and he didn't speak positively into my life. So he would tell me, Thando, you are stupid, you are useless, you'll never amount to anything, I wish you were dead, you are a pain in my bottom, although he used the other word, and all these things just went boom, 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 boom into my head. And for many years, I didn't think I was worth anything. Outside, I could fake it. Listen, I can out-fake most of you in here, right? I could fake it. I walked the walk like everything was okay. And I presented myself like everything was okay, but everything wasn't okay. And do you know how it manifested? It manifested in anger. I was very, very angry as a child, and I had a head trigger, and I beat people up at school. My dad also trained me, we did Taekwondo, so I could fight a bit. So I beat people up at school. That even just hair trigger temper. But it all stemmed because it couldn't accept me. And then to make matters worse, right, I had an aunt who also never spoke positively into my life. She used to say, oh, Thando, your foot is like a shovel. Now, I have size 11 feet. I know some of you want to look, you can have a good look. So it's like you've got a shovel foot. And then I had one of my grandmothers tell me, Thando, your ears are too big. And I couldn't flatten them because I was sensitive about that. I think my friends picked up on it. So one of my friends would say, oh, you don't even need to flag a bus. You could just put your hands in your pockets and shake your head and the bus would stop. But while I laughed, those things actually hurt me. Okay? And at some point, I think it was about, I'd done all right. I did well in my GCs it was back then. And then when I did my A-levels, I didn't get the grades that I needed to go into uni. And my dad just came down on me like a ton of bricks. Yeah, this year, I wasted my money sending you to a good school and good that. And at some point, I thought, okay, what can you do? I needed to have an operation because I had a varicose vein on my leg. Because from when I was about 11, we had about 4 acres of land. My dad would make me work in the garden, right? And we worked in the garden. And I hated it, absolutely hated it. The irony now is I absolutely love gardening. That's the irony. I hated it, okay? But I had varicose veins, so I went into hospital. We had this medical aid plan in Zimbabwe, and I went on the medical aid plan and I got my operation. And my dad was livid. And he's like, how dare you use my medical aid? It's like, what do you mean? That's what the medical aid plan is for. How dare you? You're wasting my money. What a waste, what a useless child. And I had my meds, my pain meds and my sleep meds. And I said, you know what? Enough is enough. And one night, I just took all the pills. And I said, goodbye, world. And I lay and I said to God, well, God, I've heard about you. Nice try. I'm out of here. And I closed my eyes. And to my surprise, I woke up the next morning. So I said, all right, God, I didn't die, right? So what do you want me? Why did I survive? If I survived, right, you must have a purpose for my life. So for that year, I sat doing nothing at home for a whole year. I devoured every single Ellen White book that I could get my eyes on. My church, maybe they saw something, sent me on a church leadership training course. I devoured Daniel and Revelation. I learned about our church structure. And I met God for myself. Okay. My dad for years had been threatening me, you need to be baptized, you're embarrassing the family, you need to be baptized. And I said, I will never get baptized, because if all the Adventists are like you, then I want to have nothing to do with the church, even though I went sober. But God in his own time won me to himself, and I got baptized. Okay. But I share this not to glorify self-harm or self-suicide, but to say we need to be careful what we say to one another. Parents, we need to be careful what you are breathing into the lives of your children. Children, we are very fragile when we're young, and we need to be careful what we're prophesying over their life. I'm going to fly through the sermon because I'm conscious of the time. So I'll say to you, my dad and I reconciled, all right? He died on the 24th of December, 2018. But before he died that, we reconciled over the years. And I told him what he had done to me and how it affected me emotionally and intellectually and everything. And we reconciled, and I was able to bury him and walk behind his coffin to cool, and I expect to see him when Jesus comes again. Okay, so that side of the chapter is open. But then I thought, what was the point of all of this? Okay, the point of all of this is that I can encourage somebody who's been made to feel small and insecure at some point, somebody who has struggled with feelings of inadequacy. And I guess my message in a nutshell is that God cares for you. God is crazy about your mental well-being. God is crazy about you. God is so crazy about you that he went and was nailed on a cross butt naked. Listen, I'm not doing anything for you butt naked, right? You know, right? But God came down from heaven and he walked down the road. They whipped him and he went through all of that. And when he was going through, he said, there's going to be a child in 2022 that is struggling with his self-worth. There's going to be a child in 2022 that is struggling with some sort of mental illness. And I want the child to come to me and to understand that even though you are heavy and heavy laden, I can give you rest. That's why my God hung butt naked. Okay, so in this story of Naaman, the Aramean, we saw this story, go and capture a girl. And Mr. Naaman presents the girl to his wife, and she becomes his servant. Now, this girl could have been angry, like I was angry. She could have been angry and said, I am not under any circumstances helping Naaman. God saves him well, right, for treating me like that, for capturing from my family and take him into this home. She could have been vexed and she could have withheld the love and the healing that Naaman could have had. But this girl decided, I'm going to be a minister even in a strange land. She decided she was going to sing the Lord's song in the strange land. And she told Naaman, listen, there's a prophet in my country. Why don't you go there? Okay, so Naaman's condition was common knowledge in the house. I said to you, leprosy affects your social situation, that affects your mental situation, just like mental illness. Mental illness can affect your career, it can affect your relationships, it can affect your worship in church. There are times that people can't physically get up out of their bed. They are not pretending, they are not weak. They just have this heavy burden on them. This is not pretense, this is real. And as a church, we need to be sympathetic to those people who are struggling and to buoy them up and like I said, to lead them to Jesus. This young girl, it says a little girl, and I read I've got, this Bible's got 4 versions. They say like little girl, young maid, little girl. They stress the age. So even a child, okay, can minister. Because it says in the Bible, as a child, you have known the scriptures, right? So even children can know the scriptures and they can know the source of healing. This child was not ashamed. She went in and told, okay, she went and told Mrs. Naaman that her husband could get the healing. She wasn't wishy-washy about her message, was she? She said, my master will, if he goes to the prophet will heal him, okay? When we speak about God to people that have a mental illness, we need to assure them that in Jesus' name, your situation will be resolved. We can't be wishy-washy about it. I am tired of a Christianity where can I be real? You said I could be real. Can I be real? Why is it in the Adventist church we make excuses for God? If God is God, all right, I accept that he'll use people in the area of expertise and we need to go see mental health professionals, psychologists, etc. But if God be God, I expect my situation to be resolved. I don't expect to be ill long term. What's the point of worshiping a God that I can't be honest about, that I can't come and cry and then you resolve my situation? If God can do this for a foreigner to Israel, Naaman, he can do it for a foreigner in England who is Brian. Okay, we can't be wishy-washy about the gospel. Verses 4 and 5. Naaman wanted to be healed. Okay, he believed he would be healed. He spoke this truth to himself. Cerise, and Mary, you guys talk about self-talk, right? Positive self-talk. Okay. It is important, okay, as somebody that is experiencing mental health difficulties, to talk positively to yourself. What are the things that you tell yourself when you're on your own? Okay, the first thing to being healed is admitting that you have a problem. Naaman admitted it. I have leprosy. It was visible on his skin. Most people that struggle with mental illness, that is the biggest thing that they struggle with. Do I have a problem? But if you come to the point where you can say, I hate the word, but psychiatrists say insight. Okay, he gained his insight. No, what you mean is that he agrees with you. Okay, no, but you need to come to, if you have a mental health problem, if you have a sin problem, you need to come, first of all, to the realization that you have a problem. Admission is 90% of the job. Because if you admit that you have a problem, then you admit your need for a healer. Okay, so everyone that has a mental health problem needs to admit that there's a problem, and they need to admit their need of a healer. Okay? Like I was saying earlier, so when you're on your own, what do you tell yourself? What negative things or what positive things did you say yourself? Because I just want to say every opinion you have about yourself, everything you tell yourself should be measured against this book. Okay? If you think you are useless, I just want to challenge you and say God doesn't think so. Okay? He thinks you're worth dying for. All right. He thinks you're worth dying for so much that he went and did it already. He went and died in advance so that you can live and you can advance in this life. God didn't raise you here in this life to be a weakling and to be a trade over and to be crying and to be struggling. He raised you for such a time as this so that you can go out in confidence and tell others about him. Okay, I can stand up here to preach, right? Because it's not something I enjoy doing. I don't wake up and think, ooh, I'm going to preach today. I've said to my wife, this is the closest to childbirth I'm ever going to get. And she laughs and says, what do you know? Typical men, okay? But I can preach here because I understand what God has done for me. And I want to, and if one person, no, in our ministry, Put God First Ministry Live, we decided like we're not going to go. It's great if we get 1,000 views, but we are working for one. We want one view. Everything that we do is for one view. Because if I change one and you change one and you change one and you change one, together we'll change a multitude. I'm not required to save the whole world. I'm not Jesus Christ. Jesus has done that. I'm required to tell one person about Jesus and train one person for Jesus so that they can tell somebody else. So I stand here just in case there's one that needs this message today and wants to know. And to that one person, I want to say to you, God loves you, you matter to him, and you're important to him. Naaman, instead of going to the prophet like the little girl said, Naaman goes to the king, and he goes to a human king. And the human king is not able to heal him, as you saw in the story. And the human king writes a letter to the Israel king, who totally freaks out when he gets the message. What does this person expect of me? I can't heal anyone. And it just struck me that the little girl told Naaman to go to the king. And Naaman just followed protocol. Protocol is that when you go to somebody else's country and you're an envoy, you need to go to the other king first. But for me, King Joram, the king of Israel, was the guiltier of the two. Because the king should have known that there was a prophet in his country. Because he's in a position of leadership. How can you be in a position of leadership and not know that there's a prophet in your country? Okay. How can you be an elder and a pastor or a leader in the church and know that there's a prophet in your congregation? How can people be struggling and dying and crying in their sleep in terms of mental health and you as a leader in your church don't know where to signpost them? The reason why we have come together as a church is because we recognize that as kings and as leaders in this church, we need to be able to signpost to people to where they can get help. That's why we've come together. So Naaman goes to and his chariots all pull across and they park outside, what's the prophet's name? Elisha's house, okay? And they park there. Now, I don't know how you imagine this. I grew up in Zimbabwe, right? And one of the things, Brother Admire, that I used to like is that used to amuse me. When the ministers came, I was in Bulawayo in Zimbabwe, when the ministers came to to town, right, they did not sneak into town. When the ministers came into town, there'll be outriders, there'll be police sirens, there'll be blocking streets, and then the guy, and we're like, who's that? Oh no, that's Shamyarira. Oh no, that's Nangagwa. Oh yeah, that's Nangagwa. You knew when the minister came into town. And I would like to submit to you that Elisha did not live in the posh part of town. So when Naaman went there with his whole caravan, his whole entourage, Naaman expected a state reception. So now Naaman arrives at Elisha's door, okay, and then I picture Elisha upstairs, and Elisha just shouted, "Hey, tell him to go and wash in the Jordan River." Now Naaman is livid. How dare this guy tell me this? Does he not know who I am? I am Naaman, I'm the captain of the Aramean army. I have done this and I've conquered Israel. How dare this person in this country that I've conquered treat me like a nobody? And he wouldn't accept the healing. He was prepared to go home. How many people here are blocked by some sort of social stigma, some sort of barrier that you put in front of you that will not accept healing? Okay, healing does not always come in the way that you want it. Okay. Naaman did not expect to go and be healed in a dirty river. The rivers far and whatever in Alabama were like, they had olive groves, they were beautiful rivers. The Jordan was a dirty old creek. You're asking the guy to go into a sewage river, and he didn't want it. Healing may not look like how you want it to be. Don't come to God with preconceived ideas and prescription. You are not a prescriber. God is the prescriber. If you need healing, let God give you the healing that you need. So, can I just say something? Sadly, some of us are going to have to carry conditions and die of those conditions. And why is that? Because God wants to show somebody that you can be sick and you can still maintain your dignity and you can still say hallelujah. That your worship is not conditional on receiving. That you worship God no matter what. And like I said, sadly, some of us are going to have to go through that. Okay? So Naaman now gets the lesson that, listen, I have to do what God tells me, and he humbles himself. You've got this man who's up here, and he has to go all the way down here into a dirty river, and he decides to follow the prescription. If your doctor, if your nurse, or if somebody has prescribed something, you have to follow this prescription to the letter. You have to follow the prescription to the letter. You can't choose. I'm going to have this bit of the prescription, but I don't really like the other. If God had said this is what you do, you've got to do what God has put before you. Naaman went in a leper, and I made a joke here. Naaman 1.0 was a leper. Naaman 2.0 after 7 dips was spotless, but he wasn't just spotless. His skin was like that of a little child. We worship a God who's going to bless you abundantly more than you ask or desire. I would have loved to have been cleansed in the Jordan if my skin would look like that of a little child. My skin looks a bit battle weary because I've been in some wars. Yeah? Okay. Naaman was a general. He had been through some wars, and he came out with his skin like a baby. God didn't need to do that, but God showed him, I'm not only going to bless you, but I'm going to abundantly bless you. Okay. He said, Naaman took steps to address his problem, but he wanted to pay for the blessing. He thought, I can pay for the blessing. And I know as Adventists, we're not going to pull out 10 pounds and say, Lord, bless me. But we like to bargain with God, right? Lord, if you bless me, I'm going to do this. Lord, if you're going to bless me, I'm going to march up the Sistine Chapel. I'm going to moonwalk up the Sistine Chapel and everything. We make all sorts of promises, but God doesn't want you to bargain with him. God just wants you to believe, and God just wants you to trust him, and he just wants you to obey. Okay, you cannot buy healing. Okay, so he went to the prophet, and the prophet said, you are healed, go. And Naaman also, the last point I want to raise. Naaman said to the prophet, listen, I'm going to go home, right, and my boss is a heathen. He's going to make me do heathen things. And Naaman said, no, that's cool, man. You go your way, you go away and do that. And what I learned from that is like, would you admit that Naaman was newly baptized? Would you accept that? So Naaman, a newly baptized member, pointed out that he is not going to do everything on the syllabus straight away. Okay? Did he do that? Did not do that. Okay. He said, I'm not going to do everything on the syllabus. And the prophet says, that's okay. May I just ask that we had a baptism a couple of weeks ago. Can we give our newly baptized members a break? and not expect them to do everything that we do or in the same way that we do, because maybe God may not have called them to that ministry. Okay, but let's just accept everybody for who they are. Okay, the purpose of the stories such as Naaman is not to tell us what God did. They are there to tell us what God does and what God can do. Okay, in Romans 15 verse 4, Paul says, everything that was written in the past was written to teach us so that through the endurance and encouragement of the scriptures, we might have hope. And in Joshua 1 verse 5, a man stands up, the man Jesus, and he's described as the commander of the army of the Lord. That same Jesus, who is the commander or the captain of the host of the Lord, stands up and says to you today, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest unto your souls. My last illustration, a yoke, right? I grew up in the country, like I shared the last time I preached. And the yoke is sort of it's a metal pole with two prongs. So what happens, like you have an ox head in one place and another ox head in the other, then you have a rod joining them. And the whole point of the yoke is that those animals pull. Then you attach the yoke to your plow. Anybody understand that, ever seen that? Okay, thank you. I'm not talking to myself. Okay, so the yoke pulls the plow. And the thing about the yoke is that if you have a new cow or a new ox that needs breaking, you don't put new oxen together. Okay, you take an experienced oxen and you hook it up with a new oxen, and then you join them together, and that experienced oxen, the experienced ox shows the new one how to do. Now, we have created this hub. We are experienced oxen, and we're inviting each one of you to join up and yoke with us so that we can help you on this Christian walk and support you through experience, because the whole point of Christianity is not to sit and chill and be passive, but it's to work and win souls for Christ. So we want you to work with us and yoke with us so that we can work together. Each one of us will yoke with Jesus, but we'll also yoke together. It's a 3-prong yoke, it's a 4-prong yoke. So I just want to invite anyone that is so inclined and would need this support to feel free to come and join us as a church and help us work with you. We need this to be a real church. Like I said, I'm tired of this happy days gospel. Life is not like that, okay? So let's give Jesus a chance, and if there's anybody that needs to speak to any of our team, choose the face that seems most friendly to you. God bless you and thank you.